Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Heidi. I'm our communications coordinator, and I'll go ahead and introduce you to the webinar platform, and we will get started in just a moment here. So we are Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest. This is, like I said, a webinar, not a regular Zoom meeting. So you are muted. We can't hear you or see you, but we can see that you're here. So thank you for joining us today. To participate, you can either use the chat box, you can send us a message that way. You can raise your hand if you want to speak, and that'll let us know that. And there's a Q&A portion as well, so you can click on there, insert any questions that you have, and we'll answer those at the end of the webinar. We have a few panelists joining us today. I'm excited to introduce you to Rebecca Beebe. She's the legislative liaison at the Arizona Capitol Connections. We have Connie Phillips, President and CEO at Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest, and Charlotte Schertz, our Faith and Community Engagement Coordinator. So we are so excited to have you here with us this morning, or I guess afternoon now. And I will pass it over to Connie, I believe.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're very excited to talk with you this morning or this afternoon about our plans for the 2022 legislative session, our advocacy plans as we go into this next year. So I guess, first of all, for some of you, it may be new thinking about Lutheran Social Services and our role doing advocacy. You know about our services, our direct services, that we provide shelter for people experiencing homelessness, that we work in home with people who are older and those who are disabled and need help to stay in their homes. You know, we resettle refugees and we work with asylum seekers, and that we are working with foster families as well as running food pantries. We have a lot of services that we are doing across the valley, family resource centers and parenting education. But a lot of people don't really know that part of our work is not only to serve people who are experiencing difficulties, our neighbor, the lost, the lonely, the least, those that are in need, but it's also our responsibility to use our voices to be able to serve them via policy advocacy. We advocate for people who would not be able to go to the legislature, would not be able to reach out to their policymaker to express their needs. So we speak on their behalf. We reach out to the state, we reach out to members of Congress, and we hope that as our capacity grows, we'll be able to be more involved with, as we move forward, at the local level as well. Advocacy is a part of how we fulfill our mission at Lutheran Social Services, and it's part of our faith heritage as well. Advocacy can be a really scary word. It can make you think of, oh, do I have to go down to the Capitol and hold a sign? Do I have to testify at hearings? Do I have to go and chase down my legislator to talk to them? It just brings up all of those sort of scary thoughts of, excuse me, Rebecca, but lobbyists and backroom deals, and horse trading. But lobbying is really just simply this. It's providing information and education. It's telling our own stories or the stories of others that we're serving and those that are being impacted by the kind of policies that are being considered or that are in place at the state and local and national level. It's so while it's making requests, it's letting people, our representatives, the people elected to represent us, it's letting them know what our interests are, what our desires are, what we need. And this is part of the process. Our input informs our policymakers. So while testifying and protesting are certainly tools in the toolbox that we can use, it's really often the quiet conversations about specific situations that have the most impact. You've heard this before, and any of you who've ever studied communications know that stories are usually the most impactful. And that's something we have, is stories. So it's those quiet conversations, it's the stories. Sometimes it's the number of emails and postcards or phone calls that a policymaker gets about right before a hearing or right before a vote. I know that they have told us that sometimes they go back and say to their assistant, how many calls did I get on this? And, 10 to 20 calls can be a big deal. So it doesn't have to be hundreds. But mostly it's really about relationships, which isn't that true of everything. It's about knowing our elected officials. It's about letting them know who we are and that we're paying attention. And they want to get our vote again next time. And they take seriously their role of supporting and representing us. So that's going to work a lot better if we have a relationship so they know who we are. Instead of just someone who shows up every once in a while, we show up a lot. They get to where they know our names. So advocacy is about relationships. It's about using our voices. It's about stories. It's about speaking up. And it's also, if you could go back one more slide, I got a couple more things to say about this. It's also a part about our Lutheran heritage. Martin Luther was very clear that he believed that there was a connection between the church and expecting and requiring that the government enacted policies that protected vulnerable people. There's a gentleman, Dr. Ryan Cummings, who works with ELCA Hunger, who has written extensively around advocacy and scripture. And he pointed out that Moses condemned labor practices in Egypt that were being the policies toward the Jews, that Amos was condemned the rulers for how they were treating the poor, that Jesus refused to cower before Pilate and was an advocate for himself. And Paul demanded his right to a trial as a Roman citizen. In the Christian faith, the church is the body of Christ in the world, and we're called to tell the stories of those that are vulnerable, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. And the last thing I'll say for some folks who are new to hearing about Lutheran social services and advocacy is about nonprofits themselves, because there's a misunderstanding that nonprofits can't be advocates. But as a nonprofit organization, we can use our voice to educate on behalf of those we serve. What we can't do is show partisanship. So in order to stay true and keep our tax status, we focus on issues, not individuals. We're free to educate, to share, to ask for policies that serve our clients, and even take sides on initiatives. We just can't endorse candidates or campaign for any particular party. Remember, this isn't about politics. It's about justice. It's about ministry. It's about creating a world where everyone can meet their basic needs. So now I am going to pass it on to the next slide and ask Charlotte Schertz to come in and talk about what we've accomplished in the last few years that we've been doing this work.
Thank you, Connie. Yes, so I'll go over some of the work that we have accomplished since we really started to commit to advocacy in 2019, to give you a little bit of context before we tell you about what we're hoping to accomplish in 2022. I think some of you may already know of some of these things that we have accomplished, either because you've directly participated in them or because you've received some of our advocacy alerts. But for those who are new to this advocacy effort, or new to understanding that we are involved in this, I'll take you through some of our sort of biggest accomplishments. So the first sort of accomplishment that we've had over the last 3 years really are our postcard campaigns. So in 2019, obviously we paused in 2020 for obvious reasons. And then in 2021, again, this year, we led a postcard campaign for the GRACE Act. For those of you who don't really know about the GRACE Act, it's a bill that has been presented in Congress multiple times now that would seal the number of refugees that are admitted each year, so that we don't have this constant up and down that makes it very difficult for us to sustainably do our work as a refugee resettlement agency. And so this has been a really important bill for us, the GRACE Act. And so we've been advocating for it for a few years now, and so in the last 2 years, we have managed to collect a total of 1,300 handwritten postcards or letters that we have then distributed and delivered directly to members of Congress, and that we've had conversations about, so that they would support that. So that's one way that you can advocate, that Connie was talking about, those letters and those stories that are really important. Also, since 2019, every year we have participated in lobbying days or lobbying week. At first, they were in person. Obviously, with the pandemic, things have gone remote a lot. And so we have continued to participate in multiple days of advocacy, again, to continue to advocate for refugees and for the other clients that we serve. In 2019 and 2020, we were also quite instrumental with our partners, We Are All America, in passing the Refugee Welcome Resolution. It never made it quite through the entire process so that it would be adopted, but we did half of the work, which was a really big accomplishment for us. And so we hope to sort of build up on that momentum. In 2020, we worked very closely again with the We Are All America Coalition and the City of Phoenix to secure COVID relief funding for our clients, particularly our refugee clients who were really struggling with housing and utility bills. And we managed to secure a really large amount of money, of funding, to avoid essentially seeing our clients become homeless. So that's been a really wonderful way of seeing how advocacy sometimes feel very much like theory, but how advocacy can have real results in practice and on the ground. And then another thing that we have been working at a lot in the last maybe 18 months now is working with LAMA, or Lutheran Advocacy Ministry Arizona, that we participated in co-founding, in creating a partnership with them. LAMA engages Lutherans across the state, and so we have been working together as LAMA, as congregations of Lutherans, and as LSS to create those relationships with legislators. If you can go to the next slide. So as I said, these are just some of the biggest accomplishments that we've had really since 2019. But in the meantime, while we have been accomplishing all of these big projects and events, we have also participated in many press conferences and media interviews. If you go on our news page on our website, you will be able to see a lot of those that Heidi and Connie have participated in. And that is part of advocacy, speaking out, speaking about our clients and what we see on the ground is really a way to advocate for our clients and to get members of Congress or legislators' attention. So that is also really important. We've given dozens of presentations to raise awareness and educate policymakers and the general public about our clients and services. We've invited our donors, our volunteers, maybe some of you, to join us at congressional and state meetings. And then we have also coordinated and signed on to dozens of sign-on letters. If you don't know that term, a sign-on letter is there is a statement that is being made and people put their signature on it, and you send that to policymakers. And again, it gives it weight. It demonstrates support for something in particular. And so we have participated in that a lot. So those are, again, some of our biggest accomplishments, but I think I want to go back to what Connie was talking about. I think for us, one of our biggest accomplishments in the last 3 years really have been the relationships that we have built with local and national policymakers, but also with partners, with other stakeholders who do the same work as we do and who advocate for the same people and work that we advocate for. Because really, I would say 50% of advocacy and policy work is based on networking and on relationship building. And we really have been able to accomplish that. We can say that people now know who we are and we know who they are, and we are really at the table when it comes to a lot of these efforts and topics that we want policymakers to notice. So we're really optimistic about how much more we're going to be able to accomplish now that we are at those tables and that we are being recognized as experts in our fields. So I will pause here on what we have done in the past, and I'll pass it over to Connie, who is now going to talk to you about what we hope to accomplish in the next year.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Okay, sorry, I had to unmute myself. So this next year in the 2022 session, we're going to be focusing in 4 areas. And just for background on our process, we generally will think about what our areas of interest are, and then our board of directors reviews those, and they actually then approve the areas that we will focus on during this next legislative year. So we've completed that process, and we're excited to share these with you now. The first area that we're going to be focusing on is hunger and housing. It's basically creating meeting our essential and basic needs for people who are vulnerable. This is critical because we know that there are over 918,000 people in Arizona that are facing hunger, and almost a third of them are children. And the other group that is always impacted more than others are seniors. So between seniors and children, there are just so many people who are facing hunger on a daily basis. We also know that housing is a critical issue for people, whether you are trying to leave homelessness, whether a refugee is coming into the community and needing affordable housing, whether it's a senior who is on a fixed income and rents keep coming up. We know that in the city of Phoenix, rent has increased 10 to 20%, and 30% of Arizonans are experiencing housing insecurity. So affordable housing is really a critical needs. These statistics that we see and the struggles we see really are pushing us to partner with our subject area experts, which include the Arizona Housing Coalition, to really push our legislature to create pathways to secure affordable housing. The second area that we're going to focus on is community and home-based services. When you are growing older, trying to determine how you can be best cared for, most people want to stay in their own homes. And we also know that staying in your own home is the most affordable because there is extreme cost to residential care, whether it's assisted living or a skilled nursing center. Those are very expensive. And many times people could remain in their own home if they just had community and home-based care. So we provide in-home services for over 800 clients every year. In addition to that, we also do Meals on Wheels and grocery shopping for an additional 500. So we know what the need is because there's a wait list of over 800,000 older adults and people with disabilities that are in need of services in the United States. And Pima Council on Aging has about 280 people that are on their wait list. So this is a critical area of need. And some of the solutions are not easy, just like they aren't with hunger and housing, but we will be partnering with area agencies on aging to support anything that can create more resources to attract more direct care workers or to create more services and make it more attractive for people to enter the direct care field to care for older adults in their home. It's really critical because we know that as wages, there's a lot of pressure to raise wages. as that pressure occurs, then we're competing with working for fast food or working in a retail center for, because we're not paying as well as some of those larger companies can pay. So it can pay better to work at McDonald's than it does to care for a senior in their home. So there's some big issues to face, but we will be looking for solutions and supporting policy that increases resources for community and home-based services. The third area that we'll be focusing on is protecting refugees and legal immigrants. Over the past few years, we have witnessed a record low in the number of refugee arrivals. And there's a lot of instability in refugee resettlement. There's also been a lot of difficulty in responding to the legal request that people are making to be considered for asylum. So those that are coming to our borders have a right to ask for asylum, and they're not being treated well. We have a lot of inequity that's occurring in these systems, inhumane treatment, that we want to be able to stand up and speak on behalf of these to say that they need to be treated with dignity and respect. So we want to advocate for fair and sustainable immigration systems and policies. And this is really more directed at the national level. There's a couple of the GRACE Act, which Charlotte spoke of previously, is one of the solutions that could make a difference for people, that would set a steady number of refugees that could come into the country on an annual basis and not have this up and down that occurs now with the presidential determination. And then we also know that there needs to be some work in order to address the fact that the Afghan evacuees have all come in under the parole status rather than under refugee status. And so there's some kind of cleanup work that needs to be done at the congressional level to make sure that those folks can adjust that status so that they can stay legally in the United States when their parole time ends. So those are the areas that we are going to be focusing on this next year: hunger, housing, community and home-based services, and protecting refugees and legal immigrants. We don't have specific bills, or other than the GRACE Act and the Afghan Adjustment Act, we don't have specific bills that we are promoting at this point, but we will be working with our partners who work in these issue areas to support their advocacy efforts, and we will provide additional information and education as the session is getting started or as we get closer to the session. And with that, I am going to pass over to Rebecca Beebe, and we are just so delighted to have Rebecca on our team. She's going to be addressing some things that have happened in the past and things that we're thinking about for this next session. And I'll let her introduce herself a little bit.
Hey everyone, my name is Rebecca Beebe. I work at a lobbying firm called Arizona Capital Connections. We represent various clients at the state legislature. Some of our existing clients include the Arizona school administrators, so principals and superintendents of school districts, the Arizona Food Bank Network, the Pinal County Board of Supervisors, Schneider Electric. So we're kind of all over the place in terms of not all over the place. I would say we don't have any bad clients. We don't have any black hat clients, but we're in many different policy areas, and I'm happy to be volunteering my time with Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest. But I wanted to just make sure I had this. I was just going to cover this verbally, and then I thought this might get a little confusing. So the Capitol is an interesting place generally, but this past session was definitely one of the more interesting and I would say more difficult sessions that we've had. So the legislative session at the Capitol starts in January, and it typically goes into April or May. They have to pass a budget before they can end the legislative session, and the state's fiscal year starts on July 1. This past session, we were in session working, trying to pass a budget until the very last day of June. So that is unusual. There is a very close split between the Republican and Democratic parties. In the Senate, we have a 16-14 split. So the Republicans have one one more vote than the Democrats. And then the House is the same with a 31-29 split. And with that close split between the two parties, with them just having a one-person advantage, we've actually lost all of the moderate members in the middle from both parties, and it's much more partisan at the Capitol now than it has ever been, which contributed to a lot of the frustration last session. And in addition to that close split and the extreme partisanship, we were doing a virtual session and addressing COVID issues, which proved to be very contentious, even when I don't think it really needed to be. And now we're seeing several people resign from the legislature. So everyone, senators and House members, is elected to the state legislature for 2 years. So we do have an election in fall of 2022, which is next year. I always have to think what year it is. It's 21. So this session that starts in January will be the last of their 2-year term. Many members are running for a higher office, either a statewide office like governor or for Congress, which means they'll either be really kind of busy during session and hard to get a hold of, or they're just resigning, which is common for folks to resign when they're running for a higher office, but this is kind of unprecedented, the number of resignations. So I'm just going to go through them quickly. Maybe one of these is your legislator. Tony Navarrete from West Phoenix resigned and was replaced with Raquel Teran, who is from the House of Representatives, and Kristen Ingle, who is a senator from Tucson, is running for Congress and was replaced with Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, who is also already a House member. So that left 2 open House seats, which I'll get to. And then Frank Pratt, who is from Casa Grande, passed away, Republican. He was replaced with a man named Neil Carter. Brett Roberts from the city of Maricopa resigned to move out of state and was replaced with Teresa Martinez, who is a staffer in Congressman Gosar's office. Stephanie Stahl Hamilton went over to the Senate. She still has an open seat. Raquel Teran went to the Senate. She was replaced with a person named Christian Solorio. Aaron Lieberman from the Paradise Valley, Arcadia area of Phoenix resigned to run for governor, and he was replaced with a woman named Sarah Ligori. Becky Nutt just announced her resignation. She's from the very southeastern part of the state. Charlene Fernandez from Yuma announced her resignation to work in the Biden administration. Representative Freeze was running for Congress. He withdrew from that race and announced his resignation from the House to work as a doctor. He is a trauma surgeon, and he said with the workforce shortage, he is desperately needed in the medical field. And then Diego Rodriguez, who is the representative from Phoenix, resigned to run for Attorney General. We still have a lot of members who will resign because we still have several members who aren't on this list who are running for statewide office, and I think it will be very difficult for them to be a legislator and run for office. So we will see many more. This will complicate things for next session. And then I just wanted to cover, some of the big issues for next session. Luckily, these shouldn't impact the areas that we care about, the areas that Connie just covered. But there's a statewide spending limit on education spending, on K-12 spending. It's from 1980, it's in our Constitution, very outdated. And we are over that limit by $1.2 billion. So the legislature has to override the limit by a 2/3 vote. And I don't know if you guys have been watching the news, but the Republican Party, unfortunately right now, is not the biggest fan of school districts. So this is going to be huge. You will start seeing this in the news. It's a 16% cut for every school district in Arizona if the legislature does not override this limit. And they only have until March 1st, and they need 2/3 vote. So this will dominate the beginning of session. There's also a lot of conflicts between members. You've certainly seen the audit of the election in the news that Senator Fan coordinated. There are 2 members of her party who do not support the audit and are becoming much more vocal with their opposition to her leadership. That is Senator Ugenti Rita from Scottsdale and Senator Boyer from Northwest Phoenix area. Senator Ugenti Rita resigned from the Appropriations Committee last week and said she likely will not be voting for a budget, and they need all 16 Republicans to pass a budget. Typically, the state budget passes on party lines. So there's a lot of conflicts between members. A lot of the Republican caucus wants to pass bills kind of punishing school districts, punishing universities, punishing cities for implementing mask mandates, for implementing vaccine mandates, things like that. And again, I don't know that this really affects any of the work that we do, hopefully, other than schools, and we have kiddos in schools. The redistricting is happening right now. Every 10 years, we have a committee that redraws the district lines for the state and state legislature and Congress, and that's happening now. The draft maps are out for public comment, so that is forefront of many legislators' minds. Some are happy with their new districts, some are not happy. So that is taking precedence right now for a lot of them over working on policy. There's also 2 court cases that you probably saw in the news. One is related to you'll hear it referred to as the single subject or single title lawsuit. The state last session, as I said, they passed the budget at the very, very last minute. It was a very contentious session. They couldn't get the votes for a lot of their policy issues. A lot of it was related to the election and election auditing and the early voter list. And a lot of it was related to schools and universities. And so because they couldn't get the votes for it, they stuck all of that policy in the budget, because the budget is made up of 9 bills. They look just like a bill. And you're not supposed to stick policy in the budget. Our state constitution says that the budget bills have to follow one single subject that's listed in the title. So the school board association sued the state and they won. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled against the state and found a lot of these policy items in the budget unconstitutional. So they are now null and void. Attorney General Brnovich yesterday called on the governor to call a special session this fall to repass all of those bills. I don't think that will be happening. These were things related to the election, one banned universities from requiring vaccines. I don't believe that they will call a special session on that because it didn't have the votes, which is why they stuck it in the budget to force Republicans to vote for it. And then additionally, there's Proposition 208, which passed at the ballot last year, which is an income tax on high earners that goes to education. That is in the court system. It does look like it will be struck down probably next year, but the legislature and the governor's office are not happy. They're happy that that'll be struck down. They don't like it, but they're not happy that it ever came about. They're not happy about the budget lawsuit. And so it'll be an interesting session next year. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'll just echo kind of what Connie said. Last year was my first year working with the organization, but we tracked bills related to these 4 areas: hunger and housing, worked with the partners. I think that Connie mentioned the Housing Coalition as well as the Food Bank Network. Pinnacle Prevention, last year we supported bills that would appropriate $1 million to the Food Bank Network because they were seeing an increased need due to COVID. We supported a bill, the Double Up Food Bucks bill, which is a SNAP benefit match, where if you use your EBT card, used to be referred to as food stamps, at participating farmers markets on fresh produce, the state matches that up to $20. So you essentially get 20 extra dollars to spend if you spend 20 on fresh produce. And then we follow all of the other related legislation related to community and home-based services. We didn't really see anything at the state level about refugees last year, foster youth, those types of things. And advocacy is really, really important. Last session was hard because the Capitol was closed. But I do think, to echo Connie, it doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to go to the Capitol with a sign and yell at people. You can do that, and sometimes it works, and sometimes there are people doing that. But legislators really enjoy hearing from members of their community, their legislative district. We have one Lutheran member in the legislature, but still a lot who are religious, who love to hear from the faith communities in their district, whether that's an email or a phone call or a visit to their office. And hopefully the legislature will open up next session. It should be open in January in person for folks to visit with their legislators and advocate for a lot of these bills that address what we call basic needs. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't see any in the chat. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Connie.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I think that actually I will turn it back over to Charlotte for right now.
Yes, if Heidi, you can maybe, there you go. You already know. So thank you, Rebecca. I'm always so impressed by all of the knowledge that you have and by just how interesting all of this is. I think it was particularly interesting last session, and clearly it will be very interesting again this session. So we're so glad to have you. So if any of this piqued your interest, any of the things that we mentioned today, there are multiple ways that you can get involved. The first thing, if you want to go through the bullet points, Heidi, thank you. The first thing we'll be doing again this year is we will be participating in lobbying days or lobbying week. We are calling it an education week at the legislature, where we will be in person or remotely. That is to be seen, probably remotely, making appointments with legislators to educate them on some of the services that we provide, but most likely we will be providing education around refugees and the Afghan evacuees that we are now welcoming and who are our new neighbors. And a lot of legislators probably don't know a whole lot about it. So we will be focusing our week of education at the legislature on that. And if that's something you're interested in participating in, please let us know in the chat. And we will also be putting that on our advocacy alerts. The other thing you can continue to do, of course, is writing letters and emails to your legislators every time we communicate to you that there is a need for that. And we'll continue to do that again through our advocacy alerts through next session. And we continue to do that even throughout the year, really, because the legislative session is short, but the congressional session is much longer. And so anytime there is a need for that, you'll see that on our advocacy alerts. Next point is act on alerts. So it's exactly what I was just talking about, whether we ask you to write letters, send emails, or even click on some of those links that are really handy and fill out most of the information for you through an action center. Those are also very impactful. They're very convenient to you, and they're very impactful when members of Congress, most of the time these are for members of Congress, when they receive really hundreds and thousands of those, because usually those are advocacy efforts that the entire country puts on, that a group of advocates puts on. And so sometimes it can feel like, well, you know, what am I, how am I making a difference? But if each of us contributes and just takes those 90 seconds to put in our information and click send, it really does make a difference in the end when we speak to members of Congress. The other thing that you can do is, here is more at the state legislature, is sign up for request to speak. And I actually just put the information in the chat for those of you who may not know how to do that. Request to speak is the way that a lot of our legislators get sort of public opinion on a particular bill. And so the way request to speak works is that you give it a thumbs up or down, you give it a like or not like, and you can also provide additional comments on it, or you can even go and testify about a particular bill. And so members of the legislature do look at that when they are discussing a bill and debating around a bill in committee. They do look at how many thumbs up or down were given, and so it does make a difference. Again, it's one more way for you to make your voice heard about something. And then the other thing that particularly we will be looking at this session, now that we have a bit of a better understanding of how things work and how we are organizing ourselves internally, is that we're looking for volunteers who would be willing to go and attend hearings. So just listen to them and report to us, and you can do that in person. But my understanding is that all of those can still be watched online if you're somewhere else in the state, or if you're not able or comfortable to go in person. We're also looking for people to continue to help us track legislation legislation. We have Rebecca, who does an amazing job at that, but having more people on it is not necessarily a bad thing because things move very fast at the legislature. And then, of course, if you are brave, you can go and testify as needed. If there is a particular bill that is very important to you for personal or professional reasons, or experience that you've had in the past professionally, if you are brave and this is something that you are comfortable doing, you can go and testify as needed. And so we are really looking this year to get some of you more engaged with us as we are now, again, a bit more comfortable with our advocacy efforts. I think that's it for me. I will pass it on to Rebecca and or Connie if you have any closing thoughts on what we've reviewed today.
Sure, I can go ahead and take over if that's okay with Connie.
Sure.
So I just wanted to say thank you to the folks who have joined this webinar. It's so important. You know, I see every day working down at the Capitol what advocacy and what voting can do for people, especially the people we serve, people in need, refugees, foster kids, foster families, our elderly and aging at-risk population. It's so important to know what's going on, to follow what's going on, to support candidates who support policies and programs that support the people we serve. You know, I raised money last Christmas when I first started volunteering for gift cards for, I think it was for foster youth, and every email and Facebook post, everything I did trying to collect them and talking to people in the office, I talked about how important it is to donate, you know, money and time, but the most important thing we can do is to understand these policies and understand what candidates and what elected officials support these policies. And we educate ourselves on them, and then we can educate our friends and family. And so it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't, you know, legislators are people, they're just like you and I. They respond well when people are nice to them. And sometimes it can kind of be hard to go into an office and have a conversation with someone you fundamentally disagree with on a lot of things, but they are just people, and with their constituents, they are open to hearing from you. They want to know what's happening in their legislative district. What are you doing in your church pantry? What are you doing in your spare time in your community to help these kids? And I'm grateful that you guys are here, that people are interested in advocacy. I'm checking out the chat. I see it popping up. I see Charlotte answered the question. So I'm excited to continue. Like Charlotte said, we were just, or at least with me, getting used to how this was going to work last session. And I'm excited to continuing that next session and getting some other volunteers involved.
Thank you so much, Rebecca and Charlotte, for sharing today the information that we've shared with you here. And yes, we are still new. We are still developing our advocacy efforts. We have a small, mighty team that everybody's doing a little bit of work on. And so we are excited to just continue to grow this work and grow this area. And so your participation is really critical. We are going to go ahead and open it now for any questions that there might be. I know some things have come up in the chat. You can also use the Q&A. Heidi, you can keep track of things.
Yes, can do. And I'll just summarize for those of you that didn't see it in the chat. We were asked if we have done voter registration drives, and we have in the past. So if that seems like something that would be useful, please let us know so we can make that happen. All right, see another question. Is this recording available for us to use in congregation for adult forums, or would you prefer an in-person appearance? The recording will be available to everybody to see, and I'll have it up on our website too within the next couple of days. But Charlotte or Connie, would you like to talk about in-person presentations?
Sure, reach out to us if you do have a group that we could come speak to. We would, you know, if our capacity allows, we would love to come in person and do this presentation. I can't promise Rebecca would go, but Charlotte or I or others, we can arrange to come and talk about this. And I know that Llama also is very interested in doing some presentations, so that can be arranged.
Yeah, absolutely. We have done that in the past, so we'd be happy to do it again.
We actually just had a couple more questions pop in real quick that Charlotte, maybe you can answer for us. Is there a time or a schedule for volunteers, and will volunteers receive any training?
Okay, yes. So training, most definitely, we provide training for any volunteers who are interested in advocacy, depending on how much experience you already have or not. We will be providing training specifically for our week of education, but it's very much relevant to doing advocacy in general, and we'll be providing that at the sort of mid-January. I have to think about it now. And then in terms of time and schedule for volunteers, advocacy is very flexible, especially when the legislative session is not in session. So it's something that you can very much do on your own time, and a lot of it also can be done remotely. And that's worked very well during the pandemic. We have been able to stay quite active because that is the nature of advocacy in many ways. So hopefully that answers the questions. And if not, please feel free to reach out to us, and I'm happy to have another conversation with you about it.
Well, thank you all very much. We will please watch your email for the action alerts, and also, and if you're not signed up, make sure you go on our website and sign up for our advocacy emails for the alerts, as well as for information about our education week that we'll be having at the legislature. And then also we will share information from Lutheran Advocacy Ministry Arizona. They are going to be having a Lutheran Day at the legislature. I believe it's February 1st. Is that right? But you'll watch for information about that. They are also holding a summit on December 5th. It's a Sunday afternoon at Spirit in the Desert. I believe there'll be an online option, and we'd invite you to think about joining us for that. Rebecca is going to be on a panel for that day as well. So more to come, and we invite you to come join us on our advocacy team and use your voice to make a difference. Thanks so much.